A railway linking inland Australia with major seaports has been proposed for more than 130 years. The idea goes back to the late 1800s, and since then there have been numerous attempts to build it. But Everald Compton is recognised as the modern founder of the Inland Rail. It's been a focus for the career fundraiser and lobbyist for the last 3 decades.
People would be standing out in the street, they'd clap every time you said something. There was enormous enthusiasm to have an inland railway.
To go through the great productive area.
Everald Compton took his inland rail plan to Canberra in the 90s.
And we advocated it. I went to see John Howard and he gave authority for me to start talking to his team, and that's, when we moved along.
But more than 20 years passed before funding came through and the government-owned Australian Rail Track Corporation began construction in 2018. Since then, the project rollout has been hampered by ongoing tension with some communities along the line. Issues that Everald Compton says could have been avoided if there was better initial consultation.
They would walk in and say, this is where the railway is going to go. We've got a mandate from the government to build this railway, that's it. And they'd be presented with a fait accompli. And this has caused enormous angst.
And as we continue our way up the line, we'll meet some of the landholders still feeling that angst. People who say they have a lot to lose if the railway changes how floodwaters move.
There are a number of flood-prone watercourses that the 1,700-kilometre inland rail has to cross. However, the ARTC says the project will actually help during rain events.
Over recent years, we've seen some extreme weather events and a reasonable amount of chaos to some of our transport networks. Cutting of roads, cutting of rail, and what Inland Rail provides is a real boost to the resilience of our supply chain network. So by having alternate train lines that traverse north-south, we can make sure that if there are impacts to other routes, we can still get goods to market. So this is really bolstering the resilience of our entire supply chain.
Floodproofing the line is a major problem for farmers at Millmerran in southern Queensland, where ARTC plan to build a large embankment across this floodplain.
The inland rail that's to be built here is going to be 3.5 metres high at this point. So it's going to be a wall, an embankment. So the water is going to be no longer able to flow over the top of it.
This Condamine River floodplain has flooded 6 times since December 2021. Despite years of interaction with ARTC, these farmers say they still have serious concerns about erosion and the rail embankment worsening flooding.
We originally asked them to build it at the same height as this rail, and no, they wanted to build it higher for better flood risk or whatever. And then we said, well, make it a bridge the whole way. And they don't want to do that either. I guess it's cost.
Bronte Harris's house is basically on the rail corridor. She says this photo shows just how inaccurate ARTC's current flood modelling is.
This is the water level that was here at this actual spot in December 2010. ARTC modelling basically said there was no water this area. 49 centimetres is the discrepancy in that height and their modelling. So where else are their measurements out?
The ARTC says it has since factored in local data points like the recorded level at Bronte Harris's house into its modelling.
There have been a significant number of independent reviews of that modelling work to verify it's being done to world's best practice, and there's even been an international panel of experts appointed to review our models, and they have been complimentary of the work done so far, and we've been given some recommendations to carry forward into further stages of our design.
However, in a draft report released earlier this year, that same independent panel of flood experts also found some floodplain catchments had been left out of modelling, and so had important soil assessments. But it also made clear that it was normal for issues like these to be identified during project development, and the problems it found could be resolved. A final report is due by the expert panel soon.
We're making sure that Australia exists away from Sydney, Brisbane and Melbourne.
But former Nationals leader and Minister for Infrastructure Barnaby Joyce says the project has already been thoroughly reviewed.
The combined expertise of the reviewers was more than 1,000 years. I think there was 71 scientists, experts, engineers, and there were 2 reviews that had been reviewed by a further 2 reviews that had been reviewed then again by a further 2 reviews, which was then reviewed by an independent reviewer. And you know what they asked me for when I went to talk to them? They wanted another review.
Politics plays a role in any major infrastructure project. And last year, a Senate inquiry into the Inland Rail project made some sharp criticisms. Titled Derailed from the Start, it raised concerns about transparency, questioned the business case and the ever-increasing cost, now over $14 billion, which the report says could blow out to more than $20 billion.
The findings were consistent with the observations of Cameron Simpkins, a former project director at ARTC.
The feasibility phase, when I arrived and we got the documentation, it was very clear that it had been done in a rush.
Rushed? It should have happened like 1950. And if I followed the not rushed process, we wouldn't be building it at all.
It certainly appeared like most of it was done desktop, to be perfectly honest. I think they just looked on Google Maps and went, no problems here, keep going.
It's a theory that aligns with a meeting Kim and Russell Stevens had with ARTC on their property in southern Queensland.
They asked me where was the house on the map, and I said, well, it's actually under the line that you have there on that map in front of you. The house is under that line. So they were a bit gobsmacked, and we were too, that they didn't know where they were sitting. Yeah.
And you're not opposed to it at all?
No.
No.
Just needs to go in the right place.
Years ago, Cameron Simpkins recalls when an independent engineer was called in to reassess the project.
And we were able to determine that all the culverts had been stripped out to remove the cost. All the level crossings had been stripped out to remove the fencing. The kilometres and kilometres of fencing hadn't been included. So none of that had been included in that initial cost.
Was any infrastructure like culverts, fencing, like fundamental stuff like bridges ever stripped out of the project to keep costs down, as far as you're aware?
I think that everything was sort of investigated for efficiency, but I don't believe that they were stripped down. I think in any sort of quantity surveyor process, you look for value for money.
Almost $8.5 billion was committed to the project in the 2017-18 budget, after an agreement between the then Nationals leader Barnaby Joyce and Prime Minister Malcolm Turnbull, bringing the total investment in Inland Rail to more than $9 billion.
Mr Turnbull was very insistent on wanting to get Western Sydney Airport up and running, and that was a massive investment for the urban area of Sydney, and good luck to them. And I said, well, I want to make sure regional people have a form of quid pro quo, so we want the Inland Rail.
Moree elder Lloyd Munro descends from generations of Aboriginal men who built and worked on the local railway, in a place where his mob have often struggled to get good jobs and training. He hopes the project is a chance for real change.
Many young people have got a start on the Inland Rail, also training to actually drive trucks, use the machinery. More is changing, and for the good. I suppose the employment scene does that, where it gives an opportunity for a mob to be trained and working side by side in all the professional industries.
To date, roughly 300 kilometres of track has been built since 2018. All but 5.3 kilometres of that is upgrades to existing railway line. And according to the ARTC, about $2 billion has been spent so far.
It is well over time. I think the previous government was trying to have us believe that it would be open and finished by 2026-27. It is clear that that is absolutely not going to be the case, and it is certainly well over budget, and I suspect will potentially blow out even further without me doing anything.
I've spoken with a former senior public servant involved in the feasibility study of the Inland Rail project. At that time, they said a lot of the route hadn't been completely surveyed and costs were always expected to increase. But they said with a project like this, political opportunities had to be seized. There is broad acceptance that we need an inland rail to be built to meet Australia's freight demands.
Getting this thing built is of primary importance. I know how governments can work. I can take you to even dam sites where they put in the footings but they never built the dam because delay kills it.
Right now, the Labor government is finalising its terms of reference for an independent review of the Inland Rail project.
It will be a short, sharp review. Really what I'm looking to do is get a real handle on where are all of the problems along the route and where is a pathway to actually resolve some of these problems. And, we may not be able to fix everything, but there's certainly, as we saw through the Senate inquiry process, there are still some significant community concerns.
It is unremarkable that you're going to find people along a 1,716 kilometre piece of line that here and there are unhappy. That is just the way it works. And we've got to not only build it to Brisbane, we've got to build it to Gladstone. And it's going to require getting moving.
If we're going to impact those families and impact these communities, then we owe it to them and we owe it to our future generations to do it properly. And that's all I'm saying. Just, if you're going to build it, and we should build it, then build it properly. Don't penny pinch on it. Don't take a short-term political view.
Decades after Everald Compton first took the Inland Rail to Canberra, it's still not clear when the project will be finished. It'll almost certainly be after the initial estimate of 2027. Everald's ambition for the Inland Rail remains the same as it was in 1996.
And it is nation-building stuff. This has got to be the start of many such projects that make a nation great. I hope my legacy is that we switch the emphasis on the growth of capital cities to the growth of regional cities, to the growth of regional communities, and to make the bush what it should have been, should always have been.